People still love the Andy Griffith Show and are intrigued about all the behind-the-scenes antics, even though it went off the air in 1968. So, what about that lightning? Lightning couldn't possibly strike a dog, can it? But there were a lot of parts that many fans didn't know about. As Ron Howard acknowledges Andy, the beloved and critically renowned star of the show, offering a fresh viewpoint to the program. Ron Howard, what did he disclose? What hidden facts about Andy's life outside of work have come to light? Come and find out how Ron Howard reveals Andy Griffith's secret. Not that Andy was involved in the writing process, in fact, he was not even listed as a producer. In his professional and personal life, how would you describe Andy? Now that he's 70 years old, Ron Howard finally answers all of our questions regarding the show, including set secrets, star relationships, dislikes, and what occurred after the show stopped. At what point did Ron Howard find himself most annoyed? Who on set did he despise? To find out, continue watching. Andy Griffith and Don Knotts co-starred in the legendary American comedy series The Andy Griffith Show. From October 3, 1960, to April 1, 1960, it ran for 8 seasons on CBS. The first 59 episodes aired in monochrome in 1968, but the final 90 episodes were colored. The show maintained a high Nielsen rating throughout its run, never dropping lower than 7th place and finishing the run at the top slot. The Andy Griffith Show followed Andy Griffith's character, Sheriff Andy Taylor, through his adventures in the made-up North Carolina town of Mayberry. The sheriff's common sense and wisdom always put an end to the troublemakers in his community, whether they were small criminals or major lawbreakers. Preventing the townspeople from falling prey to their own foolishness consumed much of his energy. The show deftly uses common perceptions of small town and rural life to its advantage. The majority of Mayberry residents exemplify the laid-back lifestyle that is commonly linked to rural living. Otis, played by Hal Smith, and Jim Neighbors, who depict the local drunk, both contribute to the allure. The show's audience has grown accustomed to Otis's pattern of self-incarceration following an intoxicating episode and subsequent release once he's clean. Don Knotts plays Deputy Barney Fife, Sheriff Taylor's enthusiastic but awkward cousin. The issues they encounter are frequently made worse by Barney's well-meaning but ill-advised approaches. Before Jack Burns took over for Knott in 1965, Knott won 4 Emmys for his performance. Opie, played by Ron Howard, is Taylor's kid and a big fisherman. The episode focuses on Taylor's struggles as a single parent. Aunt Bee, played by Frances Bavier, is Taylor's single aunt and housekeeper, and her supervision is another reoccurring issue. A larger trend in 1960s television, of which the Andy Griffith program was a part, included humorous and cheerful country themes and personalities. 2 spin-offs emerged from the main series, Gomer Pyle, 1964 to 1969, and Mayberry, 1968 to 1971, both of which aired for a short time. While the airing of the Andy Griffith Show drew to a close in 1968, many viewers are still enthralled by the show and its off-screen antics. Surprisingly, Andy Griffith, the show's protagonist, was responsible for more than his share of mischief on the clean-cut 1960s hit. Andy had a wicked sense of humor. Griffith was actually rather naughty, despite her portrayal of the straight-laced role. Dropping a metal film canister on the floor was one of his favorite pranks for rousing his co-star, Don Knotts, from a slumber. However, pranks didn't just affect Andy. "We did, my son." Griffith was responsible for George Lindsay's discovery of duck guts strung across his dressing room. Andy was left with no option but to bring his enormous sheriff boots home from the studio when the cast exacted their retribution by taking his shoes. Show episodes reflected the cast's good-natured banter. As a memorable scene from the Runaway Kid episode, Opie and his companions threw Sheriff Taylor for a loop by having him park his car in front of a fire hydrant, preparing him for a parking citation. Tell me about the show's entertaining details. Who was there for Andy all the way to Don Knotts' passing? An entertaining anachronism regarding the program. The Andy Griffith Show had a theme music that became instantly recognizable. Many of us had heard it for years as an infectious whistle tune, completely oblivious to the fact that it had words or a title. The most intriguing reality, though, is that it really does. The Fishin' Hole is the name of the place. I have a home in North Carolina, Johnny, and I get down several times a year. The lyrics are great, but The Fishin' Hole is a song that Andy Griffith originally sung. Last summer, I was not well at all. The theme, written by Herbert Spencer and Earl Hagen in less than 15 minutes, was recorded in its entirety by Griffith. Both on and off camera, Andy Griffith and Don Knotts were known to be inseparable. When destiny brought them together in New York City in the mid-1950s, their relationship has endured ever since. In the midst of No Time for Sergeant's Broadway run. In the film, Don had his theatrical debut as Corporal Manuel Dexterity, and he shared the stage with Andy, who portrayed the lead character, Will Stockdale, a country bumpkin. Their friendship endured through the years and into the next. Andy stayed by Don Knotts' side all the way into his last days in 2006. I don't understand why Andy was always so awkward in romantic comedies. And how was the remedy implemented to alleviate his discomfort? On-screen romance was never Andy Griffith's strong suit. Andy had a number of love affairs throughout the course of the show, but his first was with Eleanor Donahue's Ellie Walker. Eleanor Donahue, who was originally cast as Sheriff Andy Taylor's romantic interest Ellie Walker, played the role for 12 episodes and even made an appearance in the opening titles. Within the first season of her 3-year contract, Eleanor asked to be released. Andy Griffith and her just did not click, so she made her selection. Griffith admitted he had trouble showing love on TV, which made their relationship seem fake. The result was the mysterious disappearance of Eleanor's character from the program. While the opening credits of the Andy Griffith program were being filmed at Franklin in the summer of 1960, Andy and Opie were shown walking along a gravel road while carrying their fishing equipment. In one image, Opie was shown throwing a pebble into the lake. The narrative of the English colonists that Sir Walter Raleigh dispatched to this area in an effort to found a new English settlement. Yes, they did. But Opie, played by 6-year-old Ron Howard, was a bit clumsy with the throw. Because of Ron's physical limitations and advanced age, the crew had to be creative. A cunning prop man who had to duck into the underbrush was the last piece of the puzzle. And deftly threw the pebble into the lake at the precise second, making it seem as though Opie had thrown it. If Barney had ceased appearing on The Andy Show, why would that be? What more about Andy's temperament is his legion of supporters in the dark about? The genuine explanation for why Barney Fife disappeared after season 5. Don Knotts and the rest of the Andy Griffith Show's ensemble were informed by Andy Griffith himself that the series would only run for 5 seasons when it first premiered. So, for that length of time, everyone signed contracts. Don started looking for other chances as the 5th season was coming to a close and quickly signed a deal with Universal for 5 pictures. Nevertheless, things changed when sponsors and network executives persuaded Andy to rethink, which resulted in the show unexpectedly running longer than planned. Despite everyone's expectations, it ended up getting an unexpected 6th, 7th, and 8th season. In the Andy Griffith narrative, Andy and Annetta also had a brief affair. Playing on-screen lovers for a while gave Andy Griffith and Annetta Corsaw, who played Helen Crump, some real-life chemistry. The writers added a lighthearted touch by giving her a comedic last name, even though she was only going to be in 1 episode. Nevertheless, the producers were pleasantly surprised by how much they loved Annetta's performance. The teenage actress Annetta allegedly developed love for Andy Griffith, who couldn't help but notice her. There were whispers of an illicit affair between them, even though Andy was married. Although first kept under wraps, the rumor quickly spread as it leaked out on set. The role of Helen Crump was initially transitory. It was originally intended for Annetta Corsaw, who is famous for her role as Helen Crump on The Andy Griffith Show, to make only 1 appearance. The writers gave her a quirky last name for a dash of fun. The producers immediately warmed up to Annetta after her outstanding performance surpassed their expectations. The rumor mill was rife with claims that Andy Griffith, who was married at the time, had an affair with Annetta. On top of that, Griffith allegedly demanded that Annetta's character be a series regular for the rest of the program. When you visit Floyd's shop, it's always February. Floyd the barber was a popular figure in the made-up town of Mayberry due to his slow speed and occasional forgetfulness. In the episode, The Martial Stranger in Town, he made his acting debut. Floyd became more important as the series went on, and actor Howard McNear adapted his delivery to make Floyd seem more sluggish and forgetful. Furthermore, as the episode progressed, Floyd grew increasingly important to the numerous plot lines. One strange thing about Floyd's barbershop is the calendar. It seems to be stuck in February all the time. Whether this was an intentional move to emphasize Floyd's forgetfulness or an unintended inconsistency in the set design is unknown. The show was 50% Andy's. Danny Thomas and the Danny Thomas Show producer Sheldon Leonard collaborated with veteran comic writer Arthur Stander to create Andy Griffith's pilot. The pilot would have Griffith in the roles of newspaper editor and justice of the peace in a charming tiny town. Griffith, who had already achieved fame in the theater, cinema, and radio, voiced an interest in making a television debut. Griffith was considered for the position due to his rural upbringing and acting experience, according to the William Morris Agency. Griffith was interested in the television prospect, even though he was mainly focused on films at the moment. But before he committed, he wanted 50% ownership of the show's rights. Griffith went to Los Angeles to shoot the pilot episode after Leonard and she met in New York for negotiations. Andy Griffith had a net worth of about $35 million when he passed away. When Andy punched a wall, he shattered his hand. Andy Griffith was known mostly for his Joker persona, but he also had a fiery side. When Griffith finally lost it, he punched a wall. Several fingers were broken as a consequence of this tantrum. Griffith had to bandage his injured hand extensively so that filming could resume, and the set was also damaged. The show's creators and producers came up with a scenario to incorporate this accident into the plot, suggesting that Andy hurt himself while chasing down a gang of dangerous criminals. The bandaged hand became an inconspicuous story point because of this ingenious technique. A contract was not in place when Don Knotts worked. I know it sounds crazy, but Barney Fife might have only aired for one episode. Don Knotts was one of a handful of actors who didn't have a signed contract when he originally joined the cast. Dropped by Morris Evans's place. No Time for Sergeants is the name of the new Broadway show. I see. His on-screen chemistry with Andy, however, led producers to quickly offer him a one-year contract. Without the charming Barney Fife, it's difficult to imagine the Andy Griffith program. Both on and off-screen, Floyd retired. Actor Howard McNear was ultimately written off the program due to his continuing health concerns following a stroke. In the final episode of the 7th season of Andy Griffith Show, Floyd the barber made his farewell visit. Floyd had saved up enough money to retire, as shown in the plot. Tragically, Howard disappeared not long after he left the show. Emmett Clark, played by seasoned character actor Paul Hartman, was brought in to fill in for Howard, who was absent. After Floyd departed his barbershop in Mayberry, Emmett, who was good at fixing things, decided to open up shop there. In the beginning, Andy and Barney were related. During the pilot episode, Andy and Barney made fun of the small-town practice of family appointments to public office by jokingly calling each other cousins. Their on-screen chemistry, however, led to a reimagining of their relationship as that of childhood buddies. The creators subtly hinted throughout the show that Barney might not have any blood ties to the Taylors. There were other instances in the porch conversations where Aunt Bee herself reminded Andy that Barney was only a friend and had no familial connection to either of them. Evidently unrelated to the sheriff, Andy encounters Barney's retrograde cousin in Cousin Virgil. In spite of their shared family history, Andy and Barney are portrayed as inseparable childhood pals from Mayberry. It was originally planned that Andy would be the comic. Andy Griffith was supposed to play the major part in the comedy when the show initially premiered, as opposed to the other characters who acted out their parts. But as Don Knotts showed off his natural comic abilities, it was obvious that Barney ought to play the role of the comic foil to Andy's straight guy image. Because of how well the dynamic worked, it was decided to switch roles, which made the show even funny. In multiple interviews, Andy Griffith described how, by the second episode, he had already decided that Don Knotts should play the straight man and he should play the comedy lead. Because of the unique connection they had, Don Knotts also divulged a little acting trick of his. In an interview, he said that he would occasionally attempt to make it even hilarious by seeing Andy's eyes as they tried to contain their laughter. The on-screen chemistry between the two performers was largely due to their mutual admiration and understanding. Unfortunately, in order to avoid exhausting their audiences, they retire early in their careers. The Andy Griffith Show's creators made the astute decision to end the show after 8 seasons. Never once did the show dip lower than 7th place in Nielsen ratings during its existence. Actually, it accomplished the incredible accomplishment of finishing its run atop the chart, joining Seinfeld and I Love Lucy as the only other sitcoms to do so. Andy and Frances were never a good fit. In real life, Andy Griffith and Aunt Bee's relationship was completely different from their on-screen camaraderie. Andy Griffith's incessant teasing and pranking irritated Frances Bavier, who played Aunt Bee and thought of herself as a serious dramatic actress. But Andy and Frances made up years after their initial split. Just months before she passed away, Frances apologized to Andy for their strained relationship. they patched things up and went their separate ways amicably. In reality, Griffith and Knotts couldn't have been more different from one another. Although they were both raised in rural areas, Griffith and Knotts became famous in the 1950s for their stand-up comedy. They became even closer after working together on the smash Broadway musical No Time for Sergeants. They became a legendary comic combination when they made the jump to television with the Andy Griffith Show. Their chemistry shines through in their hilarious, well-choreographed exchanges. The fact that Opie, who is 6 years old when the program begins, lives in the charming made-up town of Mayberry, North Carolina, was one of the most perplexing aspects of the show. He lives with his single aunt, Aunt Bee, and his father, Andy Taylor, who is the sheriff of Mayberry County and has been widowed. Only in the wedding-themed episode Wedding Bells for Aunt Bee does Opie's mother make an appearance throughout the series. Andy and Opie share a nostalgic moment when Andy thinks back on his love for his late wife. The audience never gets to see her photo or hear more about her, even though she is briefly mentioned. However, Andy discloses her death in an episode of The Danny Thomas Show, the show from which the Andy Griffith Show was derived, during which Opie was a little newborn. Still, the Pickle Saga has a soft spot for fans, and it's understandable why. It's the most beloved episode in the whole series, according to fans. Undoubtedly adding to the hilarity it elicited among viewers was Don Knott's subsequent revelation of how much fun it was to film this episode. But how did Ron deal with the most difficult moments that he chose from the Andy Show? For Andy, Ron Howard chooses the most loathed moment. Though he likes sitcoms, Ron Howard had a low point in his early TV career while filming the Andy Griffith Show. Andy Griffith's silence is broken by Ron Howard. Andy, who we're speaking with, was always known as Don Jesse. "Yeah. Jesse, we're short," he said. In an episode titled The Pickle Story, Howard, who plays the charming redhead Opie on the sitcom, had a particularly difficult task. The plot centers around Frances Bavier's Aunt Bee trying to produce a huge batch of pickles, which Opie inevitably eats. Although most performers would find this role easy, Howard had a severe aversion to pickles, which he likened to kerosene, so he found it very difficult. Howard deftly portrayed Opie's reaction, which is important to the plot of the sitcom, despite his aversion to pickles. Called for little acting on Howard's part, since his actual dislike reflected Opie's experience. Later in his career, Howard reflected on the experience and the difficulty he had to overcome, revealing that he detested pickles. It was quite a challenge to bite into those pickles. Having to say anything, it was not fun. The Andy Show's remaining cast members, however, have mysteriously disappeared. And how is their life right now? Everyone from the Andy Griffith Show, where are they? When Howard was on set with How the Grinch Stole Christmas, the director made a passing comment about how similar his rapport with Griffith was to his interactions with the rest of the cast and crew. Despite Howard's youth as an actor, he recalled that his opinions were valued. Even though Ron was still developing his acting chops in those formative years, he had a keen interest in the whole creative process. After the Andy Griffith Show's legendary run, it's fitting to reflect on the pleasant careers of the principal actors that were a part of it. People like Don Knotts, Frances Bavier, Jim Nabors, Annetta Corsall, Hal Smith, and George Lindsay are among them. However, director Ron Howard stands out among the cast members whose lives after the series ended. After proving himself on the Andy Griffith Show, Ron Howard went on to appear in a slew of other successful ventures. Both 1962's The Music Man and 1963's The Courtship of Eddie's Father were musicals in which he played the lead role. But what really cemented his reputation, though, was his 1973 appearance as Steve Bolander in the legendary coming-of-age film American Graffiti. Happy Days, in which Howard played adolescent Richie Cunningham, was a smash hit for 7 seasons beginning in 1974. The role catapulted Howard to stardom. Among Ron Howard's many honors is the very esteemed National Medal of Arts, which he has received multiple times during his career. He has 2 stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame and was inducted into the Television Hall of Fame in 2013 for his services to television. Everyone can agree that Opie is a famous figure now. Rather from going back to her hometown of New York City, Frances Bavier chose to make North Carolina her permanent home after appearing on the Andy Griffith Show. Her acting career came to a close in 1972, and she bought a home in Siler City, North Carolina. When asked why she chose to make North Carolina her permanent home, Bavier said, "I fell in love with North Carolina, all the pretty roads and the trees." She went on to describe how much she adores the state's scenic surroundings. Even after all these years, Bavier never had a family of her own. From her house in Siler City, Bavier actively promoted philanthropic causes including the Christmas and Easter Seals Societies, according to an article published in the Courier Tribune in 1981 by Chip Walk. She also frequently wrote heartfelt messages of encouragement to autograph seekers. After Jim Nabors' breakout performance as Gomer Pyle on Andy Griffith's show became an enormous hit, the actor got his own spin-off series, Gomer Pyle, USMC. In addition to his acting career, Nabors was a regular guest star on numerous variety shows in the 60s and 70s, where his deep baritone singing voice was on full display. In 1969 and 1974, he captivated audiences with his talent even as he led his own shows. Romantic ballads were a common theme throughout Nabors' discography of albums and songs. Nabors married his long-term boyfriend of 38 years in 2013 to celebrate his coming out as gay and their long-standing relationship. He said that he loves his male companion and doesn't feel shame about the more than 12 years that have passed since they started their journey together. When you think of the Andy Griffith Show, what do you adore? Also, what are your thoughts on the parts of the show that Ron Howard found most annoying? Leave a comment below and tell us what you think. Please subscribe, like, and share for more content like this. Select the following video that appears on your screen. I promise you, you will love it.